For most people, the story seems simple. When they think of Sauron's greatest enemy, they picture Gondor, white walls, towering cities, and armies standing against the darkness. It feels obvious. Yet Tolkien's history leaves behind a quieter trail of clues, scattered across forgotten chapters and fading kingdoms. Those clues point north. There, beyond the lands most viewers remember, stood a realm that once rivaled Gondor in power and inheritance. A kingdom so significant that its fate shaped centuries of Middle-earth history. Today, many barely know its name. That raises an uncomfortable question. If Arnor became so forgotten, why do traces of Sauron's attention seem to follow it everywhere throughout the records of wars, kings, and long-vanished ages of men? To understand Arnor, we have to go back to the fall of Númenor. When the great island kingdom was swallowed by the sea, its survivors carried more than memories. They carried a royal lineage, ancient traditions, and the hope of beginning again. From those survivors, two realms emerged, Gondor in the south and Arnor in the north. Both were founded by the heirs of Elendil, yet they grew into very different kingdoms. Gondor became wealthy and populous. Arnor became vast, stretching across enormous reaches of Eriador. Its lands seemed endless, but territory alone does not explain why it mattered. Hidden within Arnor was something far more valuable, a legacy that endured beyond walls, armies, and Arnor possessed advantages that are easy to miss when looking at a map. Its people guarded the ancient roads of the north, watched over key crossings, and maintained ties with elves who still dwelled in nearby lands. Messages, trade, and knowledge moved through regions that Arnor influenced, even when its population was smaller than Gondor's. Just as important was geography. Any power seeking control of Eriador would have to reckon with Arnor first. The kingdom stood between distant realms, connecting lands that might otherwise remain isolated. Seen this way, Arnor was more than a northern kingdom. It was a barrier, a bridge, and a living memory. And this is where the real mystery begins today. Most rulers judge danger by counting soldiers, measuring walls, or comparing the size of rival kingdoms. Sauron thought differently. He had lived through ages of Middle-earth and understood that power could survive long after armies had vanished. A defeated people could rise again if they still remembered who they were. That is why Arnor deserves a closer look. Its greatest strength was not its wealth or territory, but something far less visible. The kingdom preserved an identity that reached back to Númenor itself. Its stories, traditions, and royal heritage carried a legitimacy that no Dark Lord could easily replace. To Sauron, that kind of legacy was deeply troubling. The danger he saw was not visible on any battlefield. It lived in memory, inheritance, and the possibility of return. At the heart of Arnor stood the legacy of Elendil, the High King who escaped the destruction of Númenor and helped establish the kingdoms of the Dúnedain in Middle-earth. His descendants were more than rulers. They were living links to a lost age that many considered greater than anything that came after. Generations passed, cities changed, and fortunes rose and fell, yet that connection endured. The Northern Kingdom preserved old customs, ancient knowledge, and a sense of identity rooted in Númenor's memory. As long as Elendil's line survived, the possibility of renewal survived with it. For Sauron, this posed a problem that military victories could not fully solve. Even after kingdoms fall, bloodlines can survive. And if they survive, history can begin again in unexpected ways. If Arnor truly concerned Sauron, then the rise of Angmar begins to look very different. Far in the cold northern reaches of Middle-earth, a dark kingdom appeared under the rule of the Witch King, Sauron's most feared servant. On the surface, Angmar seemed like another realm seeking power. Yet its actions tell a more focused story. Again and again, its attention turned toward Arnor. Its campaigns, alliances, and long-term strategy all pointed in the same direction. Rather than expanding across Middle-earth, Angmar concentrated on weakening the northern kingdom piece by piece. This raises an intriguing possibility. What if Angmar was never meant to become a great empire of its own? What if its true purpose was to ensure Arnor never reached its full potential? The war about to begin would last centuries. The fall of Arnor did not begin with invading armies crossing its borders. It began much earlier in the quieter struggle that followed the death of its kings. Over time, disputes over succession and authority fractured the kingdom into three smaller realms: Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudor. What had once stood as a single northern power became divided by rival interests and competing claims. For its enemies, this was an opportunity. A kingdom separated from itself is far easier to challenge than one united under a common purpose. Resources were scattered. Trust became fragile. Defenses that once worked together now operated apart. Yet history is rarely straightforward. The division weakened Arnor, but also spread its people, traditions, and royal heritage across multiple lands. Pieces of the Old Kingdom survived in different forms. What looked like weakness may have created unexpected resilience, setting the stage for the long struggle ahead. The war between Arnor and Angmar was not defined by one decisive battle. It unfolded across generations, slowly consuming the strength of the North. Children were born into a conflict their grandparents had already known. Fortresses changed hands. Settlements were abandoned. Roads that once connected thriving communities grew quiet beneath years of fear and uncertainty. The Witch King understood that time could be a weapon. Instead of seeking immediate conquest, he wore his enemies down. Each defeat weakened Arnor a little more. Each loss reduced the kingdom's ability to recover. The process was gradual, almost invisible when viewed year by year, yet devastating across centuries. For the people of Arnor, the greatest burden was not a single catastrophe, but the endless weight of decline. Still, despite every setback and sacrifice, complete destruction remained elusive. Yet the final victory still remained out of reach for Angmar. Eventually, the kingdom of Arnor fell. Its last strongholds were broken, its rulers scattered, and the power that had once dominated the north seemed gone forever. From a distance, it appeared that Angmar had achieved exactly what it was created to do. A great kingdom had been erased from the map of Middle-earth. Yet maps do not tell the whole story. Not every heir was lost. Not every tradition vanished. In hidden settlements, among wandering families and loyal guardians, pieces of Arnor endured. The memory of the kingdom survived in people who refused to forget where they came from. Its history was carried not by walls or crowns, but by living descendants. This is what makes Arnor's story so remarkable. Its defeat was real, but extinction never came. Sauron had won the war, but perhaps not the future. The most important part of the story was only beginning. After the fall of Arnor, the heirs of its kings did not vanish into legend. Instead, they entered a quieter chapter of history. The descendants of Elendil became the Rangers of the North, wandering protectors who lived far from the glory their ancestors once knew. They carried no crowns, ruled no great cities, and commanded no famous armies. To most people, they appeared as weathered travelers moving through lonely roads and forgotten lands. Few recognized the ancient heritage behind their worn cloaks. Yet beneath that humble appearance survived one of the oldest royal lines in Middle-earth. Their sacrifice was unusual. Rather than seeking power, they chose duty. They protected settlements, watched dangerous frontiers, and preserved what remained of their people. The greatest survivors often become invisible, and few embodied that truth more completely than the Rangers. For generations, the Rangers guarded lands that rarely understood their value. While kingdoms rose and fell elsewhere, they patrolled ancient roads, watched over isolated communities, and confronted dangers before those dangers could spread. Most of the people they protected never knew their names. In many places, they were viewed with suspicion rather than gratitude. There is something deeply ironic about their story. The descendants of kings spent centuries serving a world that had largely forgotten them. They received little recognition, yet their presence helped preserve stability across the north. Countless lives continued peacefully because someone was standing watch beyond the horizon. This hidden service became the true legacy of Arnor. The kingdom no longer existed in stone and banners, but its purpose endured through those who carried its memory. Their most important contribution remained unseen, waiting to shape events in ways few could imagine. The clearest proof that Arnor never truly died can be found in one man. Long before he became king, Aragorn walked the wild lands of the north as a ranger, appearing to be little more than a wandering guardian. To those who passed him on lonely roads, he seemed ordinary, yet he carried centuries of history within him. Through Aragorn, the line of Elendil endured. The hopes that survived the fall of Arnor, the sacrifices of the Rangers, and the memory of a lost kingdom all converged in a single heir. What appear to be scattered remnants were, in truth, parts of a story moving toward reunion. Perhaps this was what Sauron failed to understand. He could destroy cities and break kingdoms, but he could not fully erase inheritance. And suddenly the entire history of Arnor looks different. By this point, the question begins to answer itself. Arnor was never important simply because of its land, its cities, or the size of its armies. Those things could be conquered. They could burn, crumble, and disappear. History is filled with kingdoms that seemed powerful until they suddenly were not. What made Arnor different was continuity. It carried something forward from age to age, even through defeat. The kingdom preserved a memory of Númenor, a royal lineage, and a sense of identity that endured when physical power was gone. In many ways, Arnor became stronger as an idea than it had been as a state. That may explain Sauron's concern. His true struggle was not against walls or soldiers alone. The deeper truth reaches beyond military history. It was a battle against memory, legacy, and endurance itself. One of the great lessons found throughout Tolkien's world is that the past rarely stays buried forever. Ancient promises return. Forgotten alliances awaken. Bloodlines thought lost emerge when they are needed most. What seems finished often waits quietly beneath the surface of history. Arnor embodied that idea perfectly. Even after its kingdom vanished, the line of its kings continued. Generation after generation, descendants carried a legacy they could easily have abandoned. They endured through hardship, obscurity, and long years without recognition. In doing so, they preserved the possibility of renewal. From Sauron's perspective, this represented a danger with no clear ending. A defeated kingdom can be managed. A living inheritance is far more unpredictable. As long as Elendil's line survived, the future remained uncertain. History was quietly preparing a return, whether anyone recognized it or not. When people speak of great kingdoms in Middle-earth, they usually remember those that left behind towering monuments, famous battles, or vast realms. Arnor left something less visible, yet perhaps more remarkable. It survived, not in the way kingdoms are expected to survive. Its cities faded, its borders disappeared, and its political power came to an end. Yet its stories endured. Its descendants endured. The ideals carried from Númenor endured. Across centuries of loss and uncertainty, the heart of the kingdom remained alive. Looking back, Arnor's greatest strength was never military might. It was resilience. Again and again, forces sought to erase it, and again something survived. A memory, a lineage, a purpose. In the end, the forgotten kingdom outlasted every attempt to destroy it. And perhaps that is why Sauron feared it most.